Chiefs made a long trip and came up empty. What can they take away from it, and what caused the meltdown in Sao Paulo tonight on Locked On Chiefs Live?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in Chiefs Kingdom. We are live post-game of week number 1 down in Sao Paulo for the Kansas City Chiefs. They come up a little bit short. We're going to run it all down for you. Thank you for making your first listen post-game, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every single day, and we appreciate you. If you want that much more, get on the text line at 816-357-8781. Matt Derrick is with us live from ChiefsDigest.com. Chiefs Digest here on the YouTube platform. Chris Clark is over on the far corner. You can find him at KC Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com and RGRFootball.com. We are going to walk you through the minefield that is this post-game. We're going to give you takeaways coming up a little bit later. What do you got to focus on tomorrow and the next day and the next day? Before that, there's too many questions on defense. We got to get some of them sorted out. We're going to go through those, but we start where we generally can take a game back to, and mostly that is the magic that happens between the numbers 1 and 5 on that one dude's jersey. I thought Mahomes generally played a solid game. Like, he looked a little frazzled from time to time. He had a couple of magic moments. We definitely saw what I think was full bore Patrick Mahomes at times. Horizontal passing, a nice little run there for the pylon, things average quarterbacks don't do. But certainly early, Matt, it looked like it was just not finely tuned. And I don't know if I lay that at Patrick's feet or maybe the shock of losing Xavier Worthy early, who, folks, if we get updates while we are live, we'll let you know. But he left the ball game with a shoulder issue. We don't know what that is yet. Matt, how much do you think that it was, just normal first game issues, or was the loss of Xavier something maybe that we're underestimating?
I mean, the loss of Xavier had to throw it off a little bit because, you've got a game plan that's built for a guy, and Xavier was going to have a big part of this game plan. But I mean, honestly, I even think the loss of Xavier was a little bit of an evidence of the Chiefs just not being in sync from the get-go, because, and I get Derwin James, pushed Kelce off a little bit, but still your guys shouldn't be running into each other in the middle of the field. And they're not going to if their minds are in the right place and they're in sync. So I don't know if it's the travel. I don't know if it's the bus ride of an indeterminate length. I don't know if it was all put together, but I mean, the Chiefs just looked like their heads weren't in the game at the beginning. I thought Mahomes was pretty much spot on the entire time. And obviously there in the beginning of the second half, he just basically said, okay, I'm going to put this team on my back and try and take it as far as I can.
And I think body type game.
And I think he was trying to purposely even instigate some things to try and get guys jumped and motivated. And it just never kicked in. It had the big play to Kelce, and obviously they had the big play to Hollywood. A couple of big moments that some guys were able to help out, but just everything was just too inconsistent. They had some drops. Offensive line was inconsistent. The defense was clearly inconsistent. It was across the board. I thought Mahomes might have been the only guy that was consistent tonight.
The thing that really stood out to me coming back in the second half was Mahomes looked like I'm not saying he looked bad in the first half, because I think that there were parts of him where he missed maybe a couple of throws that he would want back. But at the same time, he comes out in the second half, and that run where he leveled the DB told me everything I needed to know about how that half was going to go for Patrick Mahomes. It was a statement by him. I am going to run you over, and I'm going to do what I can to fire my team up. And it worked to an extent. It just wasn't enough. You look at how this game played out, and Kansas City had the opportunity. If Butker makes that kick, it changes the entire dynamic of the game a little bit. But at the same time, defense let them down at times, but Mahomes continually throwing the ball down the field. How many times did he miss Thornton? At least twice that I can remember on deeper throws. Hit him on one, ended up missing two, I believe. Hit Travis Kelce on a deep pass, hit Hollywood Brown on a deep pass. They were throwing the ball down the field like we wanted them to do. It just wasn't connecting, and the loss of Xavier Worthy early on, I think, really hurt, because I do think that he was meant to be a big part of this offense. Matt, when you look at this and you look at how Mahomes played in this game, when you look at the rest of the team as well, how do you think that they move forward knowing that he did as much as he possibly could in a lot of ways, and still they came up short.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at parts of this game as half full and half empty. And I mean, the half full part of it, you could say that, hey, this team got outplayed in every aspect, all three phases. They got outplayed by the Chargers. Justin Herbert plays a close to perfect game. Keenan Allen all of a sudden looked rejuvenated, like he's 24 again. Quentin Johnston actually showed up. It has a great game. About the only thing that you could really say that the Chargers didn't do was really run the football effectively. And even then you could circle that back and say, hey, okay, well, they're also playing without one of their best offensive players and Rashawn Slater. Mekhi Becton was ill. So, there was reasons why maybe that the offensive line didn't have the run blocking that they wanted to tonight. And that was the only area where they really suffered. So you're talking about all these areas in which the Chargers just outplayed you, and you lose by one score in what ostensibly was a road game. And with the Chargers maybe playing the best football that they can play. And you played what was, I think, a C- effort at maybe best. So you look at it in that respect, and you could probably say, okay, this isn't the end of the world, but it's going to be scary because obviously you don't have a lot of time to turn around and get ready for the Eagles, which is going to be another kind of one of these games next week. That's going to be hard fought and physical. And I'm just not sure how many other positives that you can take out of this game. I mean, there's a lot for everybody to work on, but I just don't know if there's a lot that you could look at this game and say, okay, well, here's something positive that you could build on. Yes, Hollywood had, 10 catches for 99 yards, but also had maybe a drop or two that he shouldn't have. There was a handful of targets that just you weren't on the same page. You mentioned the Tyquan Thornton, the two deep balls just being a little off. Kelsey was a little off, only 4 targets all night. I mean, there's not anything else I can really point to and say, hey, so-and-so had a good game. I mean, everything else I think is everybody's got something to work on.
I think working is part of the process. They will find some of those things. Later in the show, I'm going to go over and give you an A or B, Matt, because I have 2 things that I would call at least kernels of something positive they can build from. But there's too many questions to answer before that. There's all these things have to come. Obviously, we need a big update on Xavier Worthy. When we get that, we'll let you guys know, and we will have reaction for that. Whether it's tonight on this stream or some other time, we will have it for you. But there's questions on defense from top to bottom. Is there anyone who cares about playing defense besides Chris Jones? That's question number 1, and that's next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, your daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, it means cashing in, and that's what you're looking for. With football back now, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way for you to get in the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 projections, and you can turn your takes into real money and, more importantly, real prizes in less than 60 seconds. I did have Patrick Mahomes hitting 300 yards. Take that kind of number. You can choose more or less and get that done. His line tonight was 0.5. You would have made cash either way if you had gotten in the action at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup wins. Get in there right now at LOCKEDONNFL is the code for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. This is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. Brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. Because these movements that we do more than win, they push what's possible. They remind us to go the extra yard, shift into that next higher gear, and keep moving the game forward. The Chiefs have to do that as they look to get this season off to a start. Last year, you didn't have Rashee Rice. Well, guess what? You're not going to have Rashee Rice for the first 6 weeks this season either. It's about who takes that opportunity to step into the light, to step onto the field, make that shift, and take that gear forward. We're all looking for that. That's what keeps fans and players alike moving forward and always chasing that next great moment. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Now, you can find all the information that you need in writing over at ChiefsDigest.com, because that's where Matt does all of his great work. You can find Chris at KC Chiefs Corner and me at NFL33.com and RGR Football. Matt, the defense in particular just didn't have it together. Much like we were worried against the Seahawks in the preseason about how the effort just wasn't there. I was concerned about the run tonight. That didn't materialize. Although they didn't look great, they actually held Hampton to 3.2 yards per carry, which is the same as you got out of Hunt. So in terms of like bites at the apple, they did fine. But it was the pass rush that wasn't getting home, and I had higher expectations. I saw a couple of things that I liked. I thought George Karlaftis had a couple of really nice get-offs. Had some trouble. I've got held a few times that went unnoticed. I will put it that way. As well as Ashton Gillotte, I thought made a great contribution when he was out there early. He got dinged up on special teams at one point. I think that fell off. But I didn't see much from Mike Dan. I didn't see much from Charles Menahue. Chris Jones was Chris Jones, but clearly they even showed him on the broadcast being on the sidelines at a point. I don't know if this was the trip or if this was the expectation to face the run that kind of caught them off guard, but didn't look like they were prepared for the pass rush. What did you see that may have happened?
Yeah, and even with Chris, I mean, Chris played a lot of snaps tonight and played a lot. So I think that was certainly maybe a little bit factor into fatigue. And again, I mean, I'm not paid to make excuses for this team, so I'm not going to. I don't know if however many extra minutes that they had on a bus ride compared to the Chargers, how much it played into it on the defensive side. But again, the defense looked worn out. They just didn't, look crisp from the very beginning. And other than, I thought that Chris had probably the best game of anybody on the defensive side. And that was with the Chargers. I mean, obviously trying to take him out the game as much as they could. What I thought was fairly disappointing was that nobody else really had that strong of a game, including the secondary. First glance, I mean, I may feel differently when, you see the all 22. I thought Brian Cook looked like he had a pretty decent game, but Tamari Connor, Jaden Hicks, Jalen Watson were once again really inconsistent. I don't even think that, Trent McDuffie had the best game. And, what was really, I think, disappointing is, that, and obviously Spags likes his defense to be multiple, so they're going to do a lot of things, but they just weren't a very good in zone defense tonight. I mean, they just got ripped apart in zone. And that's a problem. I mean, admittedly, hey, Justin Herbert's seen a few things, and Keenan Allen was probably the biggest culprit. But when Quentin Johnston's beating you in zone, that's a concern. And so, it's either you just weren't ready, you weren't prepared, you mentally weren't there. And Andy Reid just got to the podium. He's talking about, that not having maybe this team mentally prepared, that being part of it. By the way, no details specifically on Xavier Worthy. Says they'll have more information hopefully tomorrow. So it sounds like they're going to wait until they get back to Kansas City to have an MRI done. They're just describing it as a shoulder injury for now.
Kind of surprising on that they're not going to give any kind of update, but we will let you know once we get more information on that. The one thing, and I have to ask this, Matt, because the thing that stood out to me, and I understand the game was over when it happened. When you look at Chris Jones and Drew Tranquill going after each other at the very end of the game, what do you take from that? I understand there's frustration. I understand these guys have played together for years, but that's not something that you normally see this team doing during a game.
Yeah, it certainly seemed like there were just, some tempers flaring across the board. And sometimes, it's hard to tell. I hate speculating on it because it's really difficult to see and to really know what was involved in it. I mean, I know there was even another shot at, Kelsey and Jawan Taylor. I mean, was that Travis Kelsey yelling at Jawan Taylor? I don't know. Maybe he was just screaming at him about how they're going to have ice cream on the plane after the game. I don't know. But it does fit in at least with one concept coming out of this game, which was that this defense wasn't very well composed tonight. And I mean, you could say the same thing offensively too. I mean, and that's something that you don't normally see from a Chiefs team. Normally they're composed. Tonight they were not.
I think that's fair to say. You mentioned the secondary, and I will say the glaring problem for me tonight that wasn't the pass rush was that they missed Justin Reed. I don't necessarily blame Jaden Hicks for his struggles. He's asked now to move into a position that he didn't have to play a whole lot of in terms of dealing with switch releases on man coverage against an experienced wide receiver in Keenan Allen, who loves to sink his teeth into the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought that was maybe an expectation a little bit too far. When he's available to play in space, I think he's continuing to make progress, but that man coverage thing where he has to drop down is just not his forte. And I think pushing him into that role maybe exposed a few things. I think the same thing with Shamari Conner. They both struggled. Jalen Watson was inexplicable, and I won't left Fulton off the hook either. I thought he left a couple of zones just absolutely blew coverage. There were too many mistakes out there, and that's the big question for me. If you're on the plane right now, and obviously they're going to look at the film, but Spags has got to figure out what's going on. What suggestions, if you're on the staff, what are you saying to him, Doug?
Yeah, it's a good question because, some of the things that you saw tonight were just very uncharacteristic of this team. And that's why, I mean, and like I said earlier, I'm not trying to make excuses for this team, but there was a really good reason why the Chargers wanted the Chiefs to be this team in Brazil. The Chargers were chosen to play this game, and then they were given the opportunity to have input on who would be the visiting team, which game they would take on the road. And so the Chargers, there's a reason why they didn't want to play in front of a Chiefs home crowd in Los Angeles. They knew all about the logistics involved in going from Brazil. They knew about the Packers and all the complaints that they had last year. There was a really good reason why the Chargers wanted to get the Chiefs in Brazil to play this game, because they knew that they would have the advantage. You just wondered if the Chiefs would have enough intangibles to balance that out. So, I don't think you can just completely dismiss that as an element of this game. But at the same time, what am I telling Spags? To a degree, you probably need to light a fire under this team this week. That's a little bit of it. You can't have them come out flat next week. And again, was coming out flat just a part of the logistics of this trip? Hey, you know what? The Chargers were on a plane for 11 hours too, so you can't really point that. Sure, you can blame the bus ride, but other than that, both teams had some similar hoops, and I didn't see the Chargers coming out with a lack of fire. They had it, so the Chiefs didn't. Why did you come out flat? The other part of it too, is that and I think that they knew this. Spags knew that they're going to have some things to figure out in the secondary in the first quarter of the season, because they didn't have Christian Fulton for most of training camp. So they really don't know what their best rotation is. And Jalen Watson has been inconsistent. He was inconsistent again tonight. They're going to have to figure out, what is their best rotation? What is their best group? And maybe they're not going to know until week 4, because maybe they won't know until they get Najee Johnson back and he's into the mix again. That's going to be the thing, is that and we knew this going in, that there was going to be some rotation. And the only thing that's really surprised to me was that I thought that the defensive line would be a much more of a liability than it was tonight. Now, they had their own troubles with not being able to get any pressure whatsoever for the most part on Justin Herbert without blitzing. But against the run, they actually held up better than I expected.
Well, and that was, I think, one of the other stories of this game that really stood out to me is I expected the Chargers to come out and run the ball probably twice as much as they passed, and it was almost the exact opposite. They wanted to throw the ball against Kansas City, and that stood out from the start. Do you think that was part of a game plan issue for the Chiefs defense, at least early on in the game? Because they did slow the Chargers down in the second half.
Yeah, I would have to imagine that they were a little bit surprised that the Chargers came out throwing the football as much as they did. I think that they were probably expecting exactly what you mentioned, that the Chargers were going to try to establish the run early, and maybe that led to some of the early issues and everything. Maybe they were peeking into the backfield and looking more towards the run first and not really paying attention to the pass. So that could be part of that issue. And I know we're focusing on the defense, but I also think looking at it the other way, I was kind of surprised that the Chiefs didn't really make much of an effort to try and establish the run at all. I think that was a bit of a mistake on the offensive side. So maybe both teams did things a little bit uncharacteristic. You thought that the Chiefs might try to run a little bit more than they did. They abandoned the run quickly. and just never really ever got back to it. The Chargers, I don't think they abandoned the run. I think that they ran the football. They just didn't run it very well, but they clearly came out with a plan to attack this Chiefs secondary, and they did a pretty good job of it.
There are plenty of takeaways. We're going to give you the real ones, and I'm going to give you one positive one. His name is JuJu. That's next.
It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this weekend's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. For the Chiefs, I will say Travis Kelce stepped up at moments with that big touchdown catch. Patrick Mahomes stepped up, had a huge throw to Hollywood Brown late in the game. A play that was reminiscent of the Chiefs versus the Ravens a couple years ago to Tyreek Hill with a huge play down the field to Hollywood Brown. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Patrick Mahomes is on a streak. He was that guy tonight for the Chiefs. And just like Patrick Mahomes delivered for the Chiefs, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18.
I'm going to unmute the mic, and then we're going to give you the takeaways because they are important. There are pluses and minuses. There's plenty of minuses. We've covered several of them. I want to turn it just a little bit, Matt. We know we have to regroup. We're going to look at the film. We're going to have breakdowns for you next week as well. So don't miss that. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you do that and check out Chiefs Digest as well. But Matt, some of the bright spots. I thought in losing Xavier, I feel that was a large chunk of the game plan that just went straight out the window. And I think the unfamiliarity of the roles that needed to be switched up led to some of the things early, like Hollywood's drop, etc. Just some slight misses. But the one guy that was a rock for this team, more so than Travis Kelce, no offense, Trav, but 5 for 5 on targets. JuJu Smith-Schuster moved the ball, was there as the possession receiver. He looks better than he looked in camp to me, and he looks way better than he looked last season when he had some miraculous games as well. I'm really thankful that they have a safety net there. How can they build on that going forward? And did you see the same thing I did?
Yeah, I did. I kind of felt like that was going to be the role that JuJu played anyway, especially early in the season, because, and with Jalen Royals out, the expectation was that JuJu was going to be the guy that probably stepped in the most and replaced Rashee Rice in the offense, and at least the role that Rashee would be playing. Now, hey, there's a difference between JuJu at this point in his career and Rashee Rice. So you're not going to be getting the same kind of production. But I think that what JuJu gave you, it was valuable. And obviously he was in the right places at the right time for Patrick. He was in the right place at the right time on the LOL Mahomes toss ball. I don't know what you want to call that, but just one of those things that you can only do when you've been around for Patrick Mahomes for a while, and you got to be ready for the football at all times. I don't think that it wasn't much of a surprise that I think he played as much as he did. I think the unofficial, I've got him down with 49 snaps. Hollywood played 51 and out of 61, and that's probably a little more than they wanted Hollywood to play. I think the bigger thing, Hollywood played 57. He was only off the field 4 snaps. Travis played 51 snaps, and I think that's still a little bit more than they would like for him to play. But I think, again, he knows that when Rice is down and now Worthy's down, he wants to be out there for Patrick. And that's still probably a little too much for Travis at this point in his career. I think he's going to be more productive if they back him off. But then, Tyquan Thornton, who was really, you were thinking of as your 6th wide receiver, they needed him out there for 44 snaps tonight. And I'm not saying he doesn't have the stamina for it, but that's just not a role that he was prepared for. So he kind of got, really kind of pushed into that. Really surprised that they did not really lean on Jason Brownlee or Nico Remigio at all. And Nico had just 1 snap, and that even might be, maybe I don't know if he snuck out on the field. Maybe that's a miscount. Maybe he didn't even have that. Unofficially had Jason Brownlee with 6 snaps. That's just relief work. That's not even, really being involved in the offense. So, by and large, the Chiefs just went with 3 receivers tonight after Worthy's injury. And that that's not diverse enough. I mean, if that's the way you're going to roll, it probably explains a little bit about why the Chargers were able to have some success on defense, because there wasn't any diversity. The Chiefs got pretty vanilla, it seemed like, offensively. And I heard Andy Reid in his post-game press conference, he was talking a lot about this team and what we talked about, that this team played flat, that they just didn't have a lot of energy and a lot of emotion early on. JuJu is one of those guys that can probably give you a little bit of a lift. He can give you some emotion. And I think, in those handful of moments he tried, but it just wasn't enough.
It's interesting to me because that play was reminiscent. The play to JuJu that you're talking about, where Mahomes is basically perpendicular to the ground, reminds me of almost the Super Bowl throw that ended up being complete against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at this game, though, JuJu, I think, steps into Rice's role really well. You talk about Tyquan Thornton having 44 snaps. The problem with that is his route tree isn't diverse enough, and it's going to limit what they're able to do with him on the field. So you don't have a Xavier Worthy out there to take him off the field. And the one thing I will say about Travis Kelce that I was actually pretty happy with was he caught that ball on that deep pass, and he looked like the Travis Kelce of old to an extent. I'm not saying he was as fast, but he was able to get down the field. He showed that he still had a little bit of burst and some speed. I do think that's important because it looks like, to me, he at least looked better than he did at times last year, and that's going to be important. I do agree with you. I don't think that they want him to play 51 snaps a game, but you have to think that this is going to be probably what he's going to do for the first 6 weeks until Rice is back, and then hopefully they can maybe shorten that a little bit. What did you see, though, when you start looking at this game from the offensive line aspect?
Yeah, I mean, again, I thought it was really inconsistent across the board. Obviously, Jawan Taylor had a rough night with the penalties.
Yep.
Some deserved, some maybe not so much. I'll just put an asterisk next to the officials for some really inconsistent flags on holding tonight. There seemed to be some moments that they decided the holding just did not exist. But
roughing the passer too.
Jawan kind of was under a little bit of a microscope, it felt like, again tonight. It felt like maybe shades of 2023. But the entire line, I mean, Creed Humphrey dribbled a snap back to Patrick Mahomes, and that's not Creed Humphrey like. I mean, that's another mental miscue. Even Trey Smith had some mistakes. Kingsley, I thought, had a fairly decent first half. It seemed like there was a little bit more of a struggle in the second half, and that's, once again, probably to be expected when the Chiefs are getting more into a pass mode, because that's not his strength. I thought Josh Simmons was the same way. I thought he had a stronger first half than a second half. There just seemed to be, again, more inconsistencies in the second half. And the Chargers, they didn't do as much of this as I thought that they might. And I'm going to be really interested to see what other teams like the Eagles, like the Ravens, do in the next few weeks. But the way I think that the teams are really going to challenge Simmons and Suamataia is going to be to throw them complicated looks, not just attack them straight up, but run a bunch of twists, a bunch of combo moves, doing different things that requires them to hand off, blocks to each other, communicate better, because that's going to be the weakness between those two guys. They're not experienced enough, and they haven't worked together enough to work hand in glove. So they're going to be kind of solo practitioners for a while. And if you throw some twists and stunts at them, I think that's going to be a challenge. And it was tonight. The few times that the Chargers did it, they did it with some great success.
Agreed. And I think they could have been exposed more tonight. Overall, I think they were both middling. Not as good as we've seen them even in the preseason. Obviously, that level of competition is a step below where we are right now. But I think a good enough first outings. I don't think they cost anything too drastic. We're going to review the film. We'll have more for you. Matt will break it down at ChiefsDigest.com. Chris and I will have our other outlets as well, but we're going to be here for you 5 days a week, just like we always are. When we get Xavier news, we'll let you know. Matt, thanks for staying up late with us. Post game on a Friday night, always a good time. Thanks for being here.
Hey, anytime we do a post game on a Friday night, I'll be here.
Okay, well, there's one, folks. Have a great night. Lick the wounds. The Chiefs will be back, and we'll have the sun come up tomorrow. We'll have more for you. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.